The story of this Nazi criminal is still shocking today. Ilse Koch is unique in that the feats of her and her husband astonished even the top of the Third Reich. The future executioner was born in Dresden, a sweet child in childhood, even earning the nickname Angel from the regular visitors of the library, where little Ilse often spent her free time. Growing up, the girl dreamed of setting up her life, so she trained as an accountant. However, for material well-being, this turned out to be completely insufficient. Fortunately for Ilse, in 1934, she met a member of the Nazi Party, an SS officer, Karl Koch. The young people, feeling mutual sympathy, stayed together, and Ilse, as a faithful friend, decided to accompany her beloved wherever fate would send him. And fate, in 1936, sent Karl Koch as the commandant to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. His companion in life got the same job there as an accountant. 2 years later in Sachsenhausen, Koch quickly earned the title of one of the most notorious sadists, beating prisoners with a whip into which pieces of razor blades were inserted, branding them, loved to torture the unfortunate with tongs. Ilse, observing this, was not at all outraged, but on the contrary, eagerly absorbed new sensations for herself. In 1937, Koch was noticed and transferred to Buchenwald, where he had to practically create a new concentration camp from scratch. And here, hand in hand with Koch, was his trembling wife. Many prisoners recalled that they were much more afraid of her than her husband. She liked to walk around the camp, choosing a random victim whom she beat with a whip to a semi-death state. However, soon this sadistic act seemed too little for Ilse, so she got herself a shepherd dog. The main exception for the woman became to set the vicious dog on the prisoners, especially on pregnant ones. Koch loved to watch the horror of the prisoners and how the dog's teeth tore the bodies of the unfortunate victims. It is not surprising that among the prisoners of Buchenwald, Koch soon received the nickname Buchenwald Witch and the Bitch of Buchenwald. The ingenuity of the Buchenwald Witch increased. She loved a new amusement, to choose several prisoners who were sent to the zoo to be torn apart by the Himalayan bears living there. Koch, of course, stood at the cage, enjoying the bloody spectacle. But the most terrible hobby that the Buchenwald Witch eventually found for herself turned out to be handicrafts, but not in the usual human understanding, but precisely perverted and bloody. Koch began to choose among the prisoners those who had tattoos on their bodies. The selected ones were expanded by a lethal injection. Then the skin was removed, processed, and passed on to Ilse Koch. All prisoners knew about the sadist's passion for tattoos, so they specifically cut themselves to spoil the picture, or even sought to get into the gas chamber so that the picture would finally be spoiled. There is a known case when an artist from a French cabaret who had a very beautiful tattoo all over her back fell into the concentration camp. As soon as Ilse Koch noticed the girl, her fate was decided. From the tan skin of the unfortunate Buchenwald Witch, she made herself a tablecloth. Further, Koch's madness only gained momentum. From human skin, she began to sew gloves, handbags, even underwear. Thus, one of the prisoners, Albert Koronovsky, working in the morgue, said that Koch sewed women's panties for herself from the skin of a gypsy. The prisoner saw a tattoo on the body of the interesting ones, which later turned out to be on Koch's underwear, a tattoo that adorned Elsie's panties. I saw it on the back of one gypsy from my block. The doctor who issued death certificates for the prisoners helped to forge documents, indicating that the cause of death of the tattoo owners was a heart attack. Or Koch got so into the taste of her craft that she even started corresponding with the wives of the commanders of other camps, sharing secrets of tanning and processing human skin. The sadist loved making lampshades the most, for which she soon received the nickname Frau Lampshade. As strange as it may seem, nothing human was alien to the Buchenwald Witch. So once among the prisoners, she noticed a tall and strong young Czech. At her order, the man was washed, fed intensively for several days, and then dressed in a strict suit, was taken to Ilse's apartment. She met the artist in a pink peignoir, hinting at a more intimate continuation. However, the Czech refused, which immediately signed his death warrant. First, he was brutally beaten by Koch, then the man was shot. With this, Ilse was not satisfied, ordering to cut out the unfortunate's heart, in which the bullet was stuck. The heart was pickled and stood in Koch's room. In the light of a lamp with a lampshade made of human skin, Looking at the shot heart, Ilse Koch incredibly wrote tender and romantic poems. However, the madness of the Koch family soon became known at the very top. Karl Koch was charged with killing an SS man who complained about extortion from the leadership, as well as a doctor who secretly treated Koch for syphilis. But the most amazing accusations were theft and excessive cruelty towards prisoners. This is truly a unique case when executioners were accused of exceeding their powers. But if this could somehow be forgiven, then the theft of about 1 million marks was considered the most terrible crime. Despite all requests to be sent to the front and given the opportunity to atone for guilt, Karl Koch was found guilty and sentenced to death. The sentence was carried out in April 1945. By the way, he was shot in the courtyard of the Buchenwald concentration camp. Ilse Koch managed to wriggle out because no direct evidence of her guilt was found, and she managed to securely hide her forgeries. After liberation, Koch no longer received her previous job, so she tried to hide as much as possible and not attract attention to herself. The paradox is that her arrest and detention for some time gave Koch the status of a fighter against the Nazi regime, in which she happily stayed until 1947, when charges were brought against her for crimes committed in Buchenwald. However, Koch insisted that all the facts were a slander by colleagues who avenged the unfortunate woman for her official zeal. Despite the fact that Koch was pregnant, she was sentenced to life imprisonment. However, in 1951, the High Commissioner of the American Occupation Zone, Lucius Clay, dropped all charges against Ilse Koch, stating that the collected evidence was insufficient, and everything that was presented to the court was nothing more than insignificant evidence that she ordered someone to be executed, and there is no evidence of her involvement in making handicrafts with tattooed skin. After such a strange decision, the Germans, who could not believe that one of the most cruel women of the Third Reich had gained freedom, were outraged. Even the American prosecutor William Denson, who sentenced Koch to life imprisonment, was shocked. This is a monstrous mistake of justice. Ilse Koch was one of the most notorious sadists among Nazi criminals. It is impossible to count the number of people willing to testify against her, not only because she was the wife of the camp commandant, but also because this goddamn creature, for the sake of justice. It must be said that after leaving the American prison in Munich, Ilse Koch was almost immediately arrested by the German authorities, who initiated a new trial. The Bavarian Ministry of Justice began active work to search for witnesses to gather irrefutable evidence. As a result, new trials were called by 240 surviving prisoners of the concentration camps Sachsenhausen and Buchenwald. Based on the collected evidence, Ilse Koch was again sentenced to life imprisonment. The sadist herself never admitted her guilt. Even in letters to her son, she categorically denied any guilt, stating that she only sincerely and honestly fulfilled her duty to the motherland. Koch's son was the only person who visited the prisoner in prison. The Buchenwald witch, during his last visit, complained about injustice and that she had started sleeping poorly at night. She was visited by the souls of the dead prisoners of the concentration camps. Unable to withstand perhaps constant visions, on September 1, 1967, Ilse Koch dined for the last time, wrote a farewell letter to her son, and hanged herself in the cell on tied sheets. The son later took his mother's maiden name, Keller, and in 1971, he even tried to restore his mother's good name by writing a heartfelt letter to the editorial office of the New York Times. However, the letter remained unanswered.